Nathan Summers of the Daily Reflector joins me now on the UConn Country podcast to preview Saturday's matchup in Greenville between the Huskies and East Carolina. Nathan, definitely appreciate your time.
Thanks for having me.
East Carolina enters with a 2-5 record, but one of those wins is against a pretty good, what seems like a pretty good NC State team. How would you assess their season thus far?
With a new coaching staff, it was going to be, kind of a wild card season no matter what. But I think after the 2-0 starts, obviously, I think this team had a lot of people believing that, that there was more to come in terms of wins. And obviously, they have taken a serious about face since then. I think it's questionable, or maybe just a great reminder about college football that ECU could have looked as good as they did against NC State. I really do believe that. That just kind of shows that the jury is really out on teams like NC State, though, and probably also how they approach, a game against ECU, quite honestly, and some of their other games, against Florida State and others. But I think it really does reflect a staff that, and a team in East Carolina that kind of got through those first 2 weeks without a lot of their weaknesses showing. And I think obviously those weaknesses have definitely shown. Particularly on the offensive and defensive lines. Since then, they've gone through some injuries at some key spots since then. And just really been inconsistent. In this 5 losing streak, their games have been just littered with turnovers and mistakes and bad special teams play more than anything else.
You just mentioned some injuries. Are there any that are going to affect this game on Saturday?
Yeah, they had just gotten one of the starting corners, their main starting field corner, is Corey Sargent. They had actually just gotten him back last week from a hamstring injury and have turned right around and lost him again to a concussion. So that's a big one. But other than that, this team really, they've kind of been lucky in the sense that they've had injuries, but they've been able, in most cases, to get those guys, right back. Phil Nelson, the starting quarterback, has gotten knocked out a couple of times with once with a concussion and then once with a kind of a re-injury of that. But he's been able to bounce right back every time and seemingly is back at full health now. So, in a sense, they've really actually been lucky.
You talked new coaching staff. This is Scotty Montgomery's first year down in Greenville. How is he taken to the ECU fan base, the school, and what type of job has he done with the program?
Well, it's obviously incredibly early to make that assessment, but I'd say he did a great job right in the door, basically, of signing a really good class last year. That was, in most cases, obviously, when a coach gets hired in the winter like that, you're really just trying to keep all the recruits from the previous coach and sign all those guys, and then really start. But to their credit, this staff actually brought in 7 or 8 of their own guys right there at the end of the signing period last year. And that's going to help a lot, but you have a classic case of a coaching staff playing with guys that were, obviously 90% of these guys are from the old coaching staff, if not more, 95% probably. And don't, in every case, fit right into a new system. Some do, some don't. So it's hard to say. We're only halfway through the first year. Obviously not a lot has gone right in the last month and a half for this team, but I certainly don't think there's any time to make judgments on the coaching staff until at least end of next season. I think they've done well. They've shown their youth. I think it's staff at times decision making, but a lot of times again personnel has not always fit so well, and the players haven't always carried out the game plan very well. I mean, you can only put turnovers on the coaching staff to an extent. At some point, that's obviously on the players, and that's really what we've seen. So I would definitely reserve judgment on Scotty Montgomery. And in terms of how he's endeared himself to the fan base, this is an incredibly tough football fan base here that expects a lot. So, as you can imagine, they're not thrilled after 5 straight losses, but they're mighty happy with him after 2 straight wins.
Now, one thing that the coaching staff had to deal with was the aftermath of Hurricane Matthew and the flooding issues that happened. I understand that 26 players had to actually evacuate their living situation after the flooding took place. How has the team reacted? And this is East Carolina's first home game since that time. So is there anything special planned to really make a tribute to the community?
usually really good about doing stuff. I'm not aware of anything specifically, but yeah, I think that with the guys being displaced, it's probably, and it's certainly not to undermine it in any way, but it's a lot lesser of a situation just thanks to what the university has in place for situations like that. It's a lot less of a circumstance for those guys than it is for obviously a lot of people in our community and our city that are still displaced out of their homes. Obviously, when that happens to football players, there's a contingency plan in place, and it's a good thing that it is that allows those guys to relocate as long as they need to. But yeah, this university, this city, has certainly been through its share of tough times with hurricanes over the years. Back in 1999, the stuff that happened with Floyd was way more substantial, where the entire team was displaced out of the facility and all that. This wasn't quite to that extent, but really it's just a reminder of how much, a week to 10 days after a hurricane, kind of the worst is yet to come a lot of times in terms of flooding. But, in honesty, from a football standpoint, it wasn't the worst timing. It actually happened to come at the exact midpoint in the season. So not the worst time to have a bye week. That actually allowed some of the injuries to heal and allowed a team, obviously didn't show at the game in Cincinnati another loss, but at the very least it allowed the team to reassess some personnel and help go into like a mini camp kind of environment for a couple days that they would have done during the previously scheduled bye week.
Now I'm talking with Nathan Summers of the Daily Reflector down in Greenville, North Carolina, previewing Saturday's matchup between the Huskies and ECU. On offense, the Pirates have a wide receiver, Zay Jones, who has 95 catches through just 7 games. What type of player is he? And this is really a trend with a string of wide receivers that East Carolina produces. Last time we were down there, Justin Hardy set all types of records. So, Zay Jones, what does he bring to the table?
Well, yeah, I was most specifically, he is just an unbelievable playmaker. But yes, he's sort of a classic receiver in the mold that we've seen here at ECU, and that really kind of started with Rustin McNeil, the previous coach, and his staff. But really, what Zay Jones is great at is not only perfect route running almost all the time, but he's that guy that frustrates the daylights out of other teams, because even when he's when it's third and fourth quarter and you've seen the guy all day and he's seemingly been open all day, he's still really tough to defend because he does run great routes. He's great at taking that quick, short, hard pass and making a play on it. And like a lot of guys, 4 years in college has made him a much better yards after the catch guy. And this coaching staff moved him into more of an outside as opposed to a slot role, which he's really embraced and been great at. And really, what he's become this year is more than anything a two-way guy that plays on the outside and the inside all the time, constantly going back and forth. So he's just a guy that down to down, even when if you're going to double him. It really isn't just that it opens up the other guys. It does, but you can still make plays even when you're doubling him, which I think is, something that you forget sometimes in that equation. But yeah, he is in the mold of Justin Hardy, who was here before, but who set the NCAA receptions record. Zay is very much in line to eclipse that record by the end of this year. And just quite honestly, Justin went on and is now playing for the Falcons in the NFL. I think Zay is a much more gifted, naturally athlete than Hardy was. He doesn't maybe have that uncanny, freakish at times ability to make catches, but he's a great receiver, a great true receiver, and probably a better NFL prospect, honestly, than Hardy was.
And also on offense, quarterback Philip Nelson, his first year really starting at East Carolina. Describe his game. He's having a very productive season through the air, at least. What does he do well? What type of player is he? And what has he brought to the East Carolina offense?
I think the biggest thing he's brought is a level of belief, especially for some of the younger guys, especially guys that went through this coaching change. Philip was one of the guys who very early on, even though he had not even played yet here, really took on a leadership role. He's obviously off the field, had to, if you know his story and how he bounced from Minnesota to Rutgers to here, he's a last chance kind of guy. I mean, he's burned his chances at Minnesota and Rutgers, and he knows it's his last chance. And I think he's really embraced that here. So more than anything, he's a leader. He's a guy that the younger guys on the team really look up to him. Especially during this losing streak, guys, that's what leadership I think really counts on teams. It's easy to be a leader when you're winning and everything's going great and you're one of the stars on the team. That doesn't take anything to be a leader in that situation. You just have to be there. But I think when times are going tough, and again, younger guys especially are looking around for answers and how to get through, tough times. That's when a guy like Philip, I think, is a great guy to have around. But as a player on the field, he's had his ups and downs too through this bad stretch. He forced some throws at Cincinnati the other night, and a couple of them cost them. But really, he's like a lot of quarterbacks that have been at East Carolina. He has a great arm, throws a great ball. You put him in the right circumstance, and he can. I hate the term "make all the throws" because I don't know if he can make all the throws, but he can sure make a lot of them. He really gives them that dynamic ability to throw the ball down the field. He is extremely comfortable, on those plays down the sidelines and to the post, those long throws. If anything, his knock would be that sometimes he overthrows those guys because he has a little too much arm in his throws. But if you look at the first 2 or 3 weeks of the season, he almost didn't miss a receiver. So he very much fits what he tries to do in the pass game.
Switching over to defense, ECU gives up about 434 yards a game defensively, which is 11th in the conference. UConn brings in an offense that's been inconsistent. What I would say is a good word to describe them.
Yeah.
What do they do? What do the Pirates do well defensively? I know Scotty Montgomery is a very offensive-minded coach. So what are they doing defensively to try to mitigate opposing offenses?
Well, they're struggling defensively right now is probably the best way to put it. 1 sack all year. There's really no way of hiding that stat or making any excuses for that stat. They have generated almost zero pass rush this year, and they've at times been a classic case of even when they have had guys penetrate and have a presence back there. It's either been a mobile quarterback that's been perfectly capable of getting out of those situations, or ECU's defenders just haven't pursued very well. They're one and only sack team from an outside linebacker way back in that NC State game on September 10th. So it's a funny thing that the last time they had a sack was also the last time they won a football game. But that's really the most glaring thing, that the guys at the back end and the secondary, again, as I mentioned at the very top, it'll really hurt not having Corey Sargent in this game. He's your best cover corner by far on the team. The other guy behind him that will take a lot of those reps on his side of the field this week is freshman Colby Gore. And like a lot of freshmen, he's a tremendously gifted athlete, but he's really still finding his way in a lot of ways. So really, the part of this defense that has probably played the best is the 4 linebackers in the 3-4 scheme. But really, it's to me been as much about them having to make a lot of tackles that you'd really like your D-line to either make or at least start to make to slow those guys down. It's really, come down to the linebackers being forced to make a lot of plays. But, that's what I would say. That's how I would describe them. This is truly, has the look of a first-year defense that really will need to adjust some personnel next year and moving on down the road through recruiting.
And then final question, what's been the mentality at practice this week, given that there's been 5 straight losses? I know we did talk about it. They're returning home for their first time since the flooding issue. Just what do you expect heading in based on what you've seen at practice?
Well, I expect a kind of a clash of 2 classic things. I mean, you've got 2 games, or rather 2 teams, I should say, that really need a win, obviously. 2 teams that probably have similar mindsets and that you definitely don't want to get used to losing. If you're ECU, I think that's the biggest thing is a mental wall that you've got to get over at some point, because you really can get used to losing. It really can become easier to accept losing when things aren't going your way, and you start to expect to lose. And I think that's probably the danger for ECU and maybe UConn a little bit as well. But I think the mindset this week is to really try to avoid that. I think they are probably embracing a lot, being at home. Just I'm not a firm believer that it's what happens in the game. I think it's sometimes a lot of times the routine of the week and not having to travel. And just being able to kind of wake up at home and go to the game sometimes I think helps guys feel more comfortable. This is obviously homecoming, so there's a lot going on. But I think that like a lot of teams like UConn to maybe a lesser extent, but at least to some extent, East Carolina is a team that's waiting for something to go right on the field in terms of a turnover or a big play on special teams. Anything like that that gets them in this game early is kind of what they're desperate for.
Well, I definitely appreciate the time, Nathan. Before we go, maybe give the listeners a chance to see where they can find you online.
Yeah, they can follow me on Twitter. Is the easiest place. NateSum99, NateSum99. They can see my rants and raves, and also follow the game if they want to via my tweets.
All right, like I said, appreciate the time, and definitely looking forward to the game on Saturday.
All right, thanks for having me. Appreciate it.